Calling all moderates. Recently, moderate Democrats, independents, and even moderate Republicans have been playing defense against President Trump as they struggle to point out obvious flaws in his economic agenda, which include unfunded tax cuts, aka debt-fueled stimulus, protectionist policies, and abusing laws put in place for national security, aka Section 232, to arbitrarily and against our own interests attack critical allies with tariffs. If he's so wrong, why are we struggling to put out a clear message against his policies? Because moderates in the Democratic and Republican parties were both caught off guard from populist comments from Trump on the right and Sanders on the left regarding free trade in general and NAFTA and the TPP in particular. These comments were false, but they resonated with some in the working class, with the exception of John Kasich. Other challengers that should have been leaders and clearly outlined the immense historical data that shows the U.S. benefited from NAFTA and the recent and comprehensive scope of the benefits of the TPP, chose instead to be politicians. Hillary Clinton, who initially and rightly supported the Trans-Pacific Partnership, saw the polls and changed her position and stated she was against it. That was an example of how not to lead. The problem is that Trump, a master of distraction and deception, kept repeating things that are not factually correct and mixed them with emotional appeals to making America great again and telling his supporters that he would take care of them, which is largely false. But unfortunately, in the vacuum created by lack of leadership from moderates, Trump's lies, repeated daily, again and again, gained ground at the expense of our future. As a moderate American, I could not help but to think about what Thomas Jefferson once said. I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. This is the true corrective of abuses of constitutional power. Thomas Jefferson. As an aside, the President of the United States says the Declaration of Independence is very confusing to him. He says that all men are not created equal, and it's very confusing and no one understands it. Why would anyone need to break it down to the President of the United States that undermining the Declaration of Independence is undermining equal treatment under the law? In any case, the question is, has Trump been good for the United States economy? Trump's most repeated claim is that he's a smart businessman that knows how to grow the economy and everyone else made dumb deals. The economic numbers have been good. Corporate profits are up and unemployment is down. So is he right? Is he making the economy great again? Well, what has President Trump done for the economy? He did inherit an economy that pulled itself out of the deepest financial recession of our lifetimes. Growth was growing above 2.3%, which is not great, but had finally pulled itself out from a financial crisis we seem to have already forgotten, as the longest period of uninterrupted job growth in our history demonstrated. 72 continuous months of job creation. So Trump inherited an economy that had finally healed from the Great Recession. He cut taxes, lowered regulations, lowered environmental guidelines, opened public lands, renegotiated or canceled NAFTA and the TPP, and very worryingly, tariffs and protectionism. Now, cutting taxes. The U.S. economy experienced a $1.5 trillion tsunami in the form of debt-fueled tax cuts. The top corporate tax rates were cut from 35% to 21%. And there was a repatriation by corporations of funds, so it flushed corporations with cash. Capital expenditures were also accelerated, pulling from the future for the present. Now, cutting taxes for corporations was positive. We believe that lowering the corporate tax rate makes U.S. corporations more likely to choose to invest in the United States versus elsewhere. This is good for American workers and the economy. We support this tax cut. So everything's right. Everything's great, right? Wrong. The way the tax cuts were structured have short-term benefits but long-term costs because there's no money to pay for them. They're fueled by debt. Although the tax cuts are helping people feel more affluent now, that is not reality, and is certainly not permanent. Think of it this way. If you decide to take out your credit card and pull out $1,000 a month out of the ATM and spend it, would that make you wealthier? It may feel pretty good for a while, but you're really not creating wealth. You're creating debt. You are burying yourself in debt that will eventually have to be paid. It is one thing to spend during an economic downturn, but to deliberately deficit spend during the top of an economic cycle seems short-sighted and irresponsible, though it may help the incumbent in an election. A better course of action would have been to raise funds elsewhere to offset the corporate tax cuts, something the government calls revenue neutral. The real question is what will happen in the future. Most economists and the Congressional Budget Office believe this debt will require spending cuts, and that will cause the economy to slow in 2019 and beyond. Further, the tax break for the middle class is temporary, but the reduction in estate taxes and S corporations and other vehicles for the very wealthy are permanent. So the economic growth is not a new normal, but a boom and bust debt-fueled economy that will hurt everyone, especially the working class, that will lose their tax breaks and be saddled with actually higher taxes. Well, taxes on people like Mr. Trump will be lower. To get their tax bill across the line, the Senate plan eliminates the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate, which requires most Americans to have health insurance. But eliminating the mandate will leave 4 million more Americans uninsured by next year, 2019, and 13 million more by 2025, according to the Congressional Budget Office. People ages 50 to 64 will face average premium increases of $1,500 next year as a result of the bill, and this is the AARP. So the average American is getting a temporary debt-fueled boost before the midterms that will begin expiring after the midterms. Around that time, they will have to grapple between getting reduced care and pay soaring premiums or lose health insurance. In the past, health insurance prices rose partly because insurance companies were mandated to provide better coverage. This time around, less coverage will cost more. Not great. The President of the United States said tax changes would not help him. That's another lie.
It is riddled with loopholes that let some special interests, including myself in all fairness, this is going to cost me a fortune, this thing. Believe me, this is not good for me. Me, it's not so. I have some very wealthy friends. Not so happy with me, but that's okay. You know, I keep hearing Schumer, deuces for the wealthy. Well, if it is, my friends don't know about it. I have to explain why.
Pass-through businesses tax goes from 39.6 to 21%. That's going to help the Trump organization enormously. There are benefits specifically for real estate investment trust, which is a large part of the Trump organization. There are benefits from the alternative minimum tax, which has been reduced and weakened. Estate tax exclusions go up to $22.4 million versus the current $10.9 million. That's going to save Trump and his children many millions of dollars. This tax bill will save the President of the United States and multimillionaires hundreds of millions of dollars. At the very least, he could be honest about it, but of course, he is not. America's debt problems are not new, but they are about to become worse than ever before, because the low interest rates that came with the crisis and slow economic recovery are slowly rising again to prevent inflation. Already signs of concern are starting to show up. In August, it was reported that the U.S. budget deficit increased 21%, on track for the biggest gap in 6 years. The annual increase in the so-called core CPI was 2.4%, the largest since September 2008. Now, you may say, well, Ronald Reagan cut taxes and with debt, and so did George Herbert Walker Bush and W. Bush, and now again here. So that's not different. What is different is the amount of debt we already have. When Ronald Reagan cut taxes, we went from the billions to the trillions. Our national debt is over $21 trillion. We are running out of road. What we should be doing is finding a way to stabilize our debt, not blow it up. So the way he cut taxes was not good. He also lowered regulations, lower environmental guidelines and enforcement, opened public lands on oil and gas. As far as those are concerned, we believe some of this was good and some of it was bad. Despite his efforts to wipe out Dodd-Frank banking regulation, the system of checks and balances is more robust than before the crisis. Our largest concern has been the damage to the environment. That was unnecessary. We will cover the environment in a separate video. Though we have some reservations, the above is part of the standard Republican playbook. Our real concern is the renegotiating or canceling of NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is the foundation of his economic populist agenda. The claim that only he can make great deals for America and everyone else made dumb deals. It lays the foundation for his totalitarian or bully approach to any negotiation or international agreement as he threatens NAFTA, organizations vital to our national security such as NATO, and even the rule of law, as he attacks anyone and everyone, from his own Attorney General to the FBI, the CIA, and the tweets just don't stop. Despite a significant set of distortions and lies that are gaining acceptance the more he repeats them, moderate leaders from the left and right should have the courage to speak up and make a case for true American prosperity based on free markets and reestablishing the rule of law in America versus the rule by men. Did you know that between 1993 and 2017, trade between the three members of NAFTA quadrupled? This boosted economic growth, profits, jobs for all three members. During that time, the United States increased its exports of goods to the other two from $142 billion to $525 billion. NAFTA boosted trade by eliminating tariffs between the three countries, something Trump says he wants, fair trade. Then what's wrong with NAFTA, which provides exactly that? Many states, if most states, are going to experience some problems if we do away with NAFTA. Trump is now criticizing the Fed chairman because as inflation takes off with his debt-fueled stimulus of $1.5 trillion, he does not like what it will do to his economic bubble before the election. NAFTA actually kept prices low by lowering import costs. This provided a stable inflation and therefore rates. NAFTA boosted economic growth in the United States by as much as 0.5% per year. The sectors that benefited the most were agriculture, automobiles, and services. U.S. farm exports to Canada and Mexico grew 156%, while they only grew 65% to the rest of the world. It has been phenomenal for farmers. As an aside, unfortunately, thanks to Trump's foolish tariffs against the Chinese, the American farmer is going to be left holding the bag in soybean. There was no real competitor before, but as a result of these tariffs, the Brazilian farmers are starting to plant a lot of soybean. And in a couple of years, those farmers are going to be real competition. They wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Trump's decisions, but he'll be long gone by then. NAFTA increased farm exports because it eliminated high Mexican tariffs. Mexico is the top export destination for U.S. beef, rice, soybean meal, corn sweeteners, apples, and beans. It is the second largest export destination for corn, soybean, and oil. In any case, those that support protecting jobs that are uncompetitive have forgotten what the auto industry was like before NAFTA. I remember this, do you? In the 1970s, Americans were angry at cheaper and frankly better cars coming into the U.S. But by the 1980s, Americans were afraid. It had become clear we were making lower quality products and were simply not able to keep up with more modern production techniques and labor costs and productivity, as we had become complacent with the success of the 50s and 60s after World War II. NAFTA saved the U.S. auto industry, and though some jobs were shifted to Mexico, it was a net job creator and updated and rejuvenated America's competitiveness. Even after this election, after GM stated they were going to shift production of a low-margin vehicle, they could not make profitably in the U.S. and retool that factory for high-margin SUVs without costing a single U.S. worker his job. The President of the United States tweeted this: this tweet and policy are wrong on so many levels. It is difficult to know where to begin. But beyond the fact that this automobile was largely slated for international sales abroad, as some cars that are made in America by foreign manufacturers are for domestic use, and that we could not make and ship it competitively here in the United States, we point out the obvious fact that we are, or at least were, a free market and not a government-directed economy or a dictatorship. Here's a larger economic point. Free markets allocate resources better than directed economies. Stopping production of a vehicle because GM is unable to make it at a profit will hurt GM's market share. This in turn weakens GM's ability to compete at large with Toyota, Hyundai, and others. As Americans and global consumers shift to those brands, for those smaller cars, they're more likely to remain with that brand. A shrinking GM is not good for auto workers. It is true that NAFTA has caused some people to lose jobs, but it has created many, many more jobs. Many of these jobs are better paying and rewarding than in any case, they hold the key to the future. Saying NAFTA is bad because jobs were lost, it's like saying technology and automation were bad because some workers have been replaced with robots and some middle management has been replaced with software. Yes, it's true we could have more humans at checkout registers, at grocery stores, tellers, at banks, and some middle management jobs that were replaced with powerful spreadsheets and other software. But the benefits from technology and innovation created amazing opportunities, from access to search engines, and its benefits far outweigh the costs. It's the future. We have to be on board. Would you rather have a job at Blockbuster video stores or Google, Facebook, Amazon, or Intel? Instead of going over the fact that the TPP would have open markets to the US in a similar way as NAFTA, and that could have been made the economic bloc, which would have been led by the United States, more powerful, and created a healthy relationship with its members and the United States by requiring many members to increase their environmental standards, which we already do, reject child labor, which we already do, and avoid government intervention, which we should be doing. And so importantly, lower healthcare costs by adjusting pharmaceutical patents down. That was in the bill. Let's take a look instead at how it would have impacted our position versus China. While we're sitting here bickering, China initiated something called the Belt and Road Initiative. The US is sitting in denial about globalization and seemingly under the impression that trade is not good for the United States. China, not worried about an election cycle, but the next 100 years, has launched its Belt and Road Initiative. It is building large deep water ports in Indonesia, India, and Africa. It is also building a rapid rail system through China, Eurasia, the Middle East, and even Europe. China is making it easier, much easier, to trade with a landmass that will eclipse and absorb the European Union. The US should lead, not withdraw from global markets. The world is moving forward, with or without us. Now, China's approach versus the US under Trump. China is seeking to build bridges, literally and figuratively, that will facilitate trade. Trump is seeking to build walls, again, literally and figuratively, that will hinder trade. Xi Jinping has reached out to Russia and granted Putin the Friendship Medal, the only one that's been issued. While that is good for China, a Sino-Russian relationship that is growing closer is not a geopolitical plus for the United States. In the meantime, Trump has insulted the Prime Minister of Canada and the Canadian people. Trump has humiliated the Mexican president and its people. He has insulted the European Union and NATO, formerly staunch U.S. allies. Trump's protectionist posture has pushed Japan and the European Union to establish a free trade area. Trump is uniting the world against us. Trump says America is respected again. That's another lie. In July, the President of the United States visited England, historically a staunch ally of the United States. Tens of thousands marched to protest against Trump and his populist policies. Not great. A majority of Germans believe that Putin is more reliable than Trump. This is Germany. Turkey is now buying non-NATO compatible missiles from Russia and is furious about Trump's recent actions of doubling tariffs from 25 to 50 and 10 to 20 on steel and aluminum. Even South Koreans believe Putin will be more reliable than Trump. For Pete's sake, we have troops in South Korea. Now, voluntary tourism to the United States is actually down over 4%. Foreign purchases of real estate are down, particularly from Canada. And top global students are looking at other destinations as they view America under Trump a more racist, more dangerous, less tolerant place. Not great. Let's talk about what would be good for America. The good? Economic growth, yes, for now, but no for our future. It's bleaker than ever. Lowering the deficit. Is he doing it? No, he's blowing it up again. Reducing red tape. Yes, he's doing that. Lowering corruption. Absolutely not. No, this guy, Tom Price, was Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary. He resigned in disgrace. The Inspector General wants him to at least pay back $341,000 from wasteful expenditures. This guy, Scott Pruitt, resigned from EPA amidst ethics violations. This guy, Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor, lying to the FBI, multiple meetings with the Russians. This guy, Paul Manafort, a now convicted felon, tax evasion, fraud, and selling jobs. One of the things he did was try to get a job for Secretary of the Army to a guy that was giving him millions and $1 million in loans, which were never repaid. And Jared Kushner sent him back an email saying, I'm on it. Trump isn't draining the swamp. He is sinking the swamp even lower. Supporting law and order? Absolutely not. Trump fired the FBI director, and in his own words said it was because of the Russia thing. His supporters say that it was because he was politically biased for Hillary Clinton. Despite the fact that one of the most unusual things the Department of Justice's IG investigation found on the FBI was how harsh Comey, a Republican, was on Clinton. Trump also praised Comey after his now infamous statement, until the Russian investigation came up. Trump and his supporters in the media have attacked not only the FBI for not punishing Clinton, but when the Department of Justice conducted an investigation through its Inspector General and it did not punish the FBI, they turned against the Department of Justice as well. And the President of the United States has been very aggressive towards his own Attorney General for following the law and recusing himself, and not ending the Russian collusion investigation. Let's remember there is a legal process, and the President of the United States should not even be speaking about an ongoing investigation. If there's nothing there, then there's nothing to hide. Why the effort to shut it down? Beyond that, the President of the United States had the U.S. exit the United Nations Human Rights Council. He said that he was doing it because of their treatment of Israel, and that's another lie. But the timing was the day after it said that separating mothers from their children was against international law. America can be very strong and clear in protecting our border without resorting to this inhumane behavior. Trump stated that not only would he approve torture, but would be harder and more harsh about it. This is not only against international laws, but against the law of land warfare, which our soldiers believe in, and against our own military doctrine. As John McCain has aptly stated, torture is wrong. It is wrong, and it doesn't work. In typical Trump fashion, when asked about taking guns away from people, he said this: take the guns away, then use due process later. This president doesn't seem to comprehend the rule of law. What about improving access to health care? Absolutely not. Millions and millions of Americans are losing access to health care. Improving quality of health care? Of course not. The insurance policies that are going to come out in the future are going to have less guarantees and are not mandated to have as much coverage as they used to. The quality of health care is not going up. Improving education? No. If you ask any educator in the system, they will tell you what they think about his choice for Secretary of Education. and it's not good. And it's not something you can repeat in front of children many times. Protecting the environment? Absolutely not. Despite Trump's claim, which is another lie and it's ridiculous, that the global warming is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese, which is a lie and it's crazy, Trump has been doing other things that are very damaging. He has been changing environmental laws to allow for greater pollution, coal dumps into the river, coal dust being dumped into rivers, and he's trying to make it so that utility companies have to use coal instead of natural gas. This makes no sense at all. Cleaner energies are the energies of the future. Even though there will always, or for at least for the foreseeable future, there will be coal as part of the energy mix. We should be flying towards the future. The environment, global warming, is a real issue that we all should, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, we should all work together to do it. Republicans in the past made a valid point, saying that if the United States participated in environmental standards while the rest of the world didn't, then that wouldn't really help. And they were right. But now, every other country in the United Nations is participating in the Paris Accord, except the United States when Trump pulled us out. That was a mistake. Strengthening our alliances? No. The Turkish people are furious about what Trump is doing with his tariffs. Trump says there's a Christian pastor and he's standing up for Christians. And that's just another lie and another distraction. That pastor has been in prison in Turkey for a year and a half, and essentially the time he's been in office. So why now? The reason is the day before he slapped the sanctions of doubling the 25 and 10 to 50 and 20 on tariffs of steel and aluminum, the day before, Turkey said that as a sovereign nation, they had the right to purchase their energy sources from anyone they wanted, including Iran. The president walked out from the Iran nuclear deal, which is our prerogative. If that's what America wants to do, that's fine. But to try to bully all of our allies to not do business with them, despite the fact that they want to, is not going to isolate Iran. It's going to isolate the United States. And John Kerry warned us about this, and it's all playing out. So that's not great. Now, the agenda to win the future. America needs to embrace a prudent and prosperous approach to free markets, and once again, become a reliable partner with its allies and trading partners. America needs to rejoin the United Nations Human Rights Council. America needs to rejoin the Paris Accord on climate change. America needs to stop spending away its future and develop and implement a plan a la Bull Simpson to stabilize our debt. America needs to once again reestablish faith in our institutions of law, such as the FBI and the Department of Justice, that do so much good. Americans need to clearly and unequivocally side with our intelligence community and strongly condemn Russia or anyone's interference in our democracy. If we want to fight with each other, that's our business. We don't need somebody else coming in here to start that. America needs to break the divisiveness between conservative and liberals and recognize that we can't win the future if we're fighting each other. We must find common ground and move forward as one United States. Will we win the future or become the monsters that we fear? That depends on American moderates. We are the majority.